Welcome back to Construction Conversations. Today I'm here with Alex Belkafor. How you doing, Alex?
Good. How are you, Stephen?
Good, man. So I feel honored to get to chat with you days before your big announcement. I know you're in countdown mode with the wife, with the new child.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. Going to be any day now. And if it's not any day now, then it's definitely going to be on August 5th.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. We're excited for you. But maybe in light of that news, it would be fun to maybe go back to Alex's origin story. Were you digital planning in utero, or what was your kind of evolution in the industry?
Well, my evolution in the industry began really kind of right out of college because my very first job when I left my academic experience at the Ohio State University was to join a very small boutique construction firm up in Cleveland, Ohio. And the president of that small company tasked me with figuring out BIM right out of school. And so that was right around 2008, 2009, where the industry was really just trying to figure out what BIM and VDC meant to the construction industry. And having both a background in architecture and construction management, getting the honor to try and figure out BIM for a small construction company has led me to where I'm at today, which is driving digital strategy for a very large company like McCarthy.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think that obviously, being at a smaller company maybe gave you a bit more exposure to maybe a few more layers of things? How many years did you spend at the smaller company?
So first 6 years of my career were at that small company, PCS, Project and Construction Services. But my role started boots on the ground. I mean, I started in operations as a project engineer and got the benefit of working on a lot of projects in a small amount of time. So I saw things from different seats, different lenses, figuring out, how the traditional construction management practices were supposed to be administered, and then seeing all the challenges with that. And then seeing the advent of technology, I got the opportunity to then figure out how could we be using this technology better from a construction operations perspective, but then thinking about, well, there's more to be done here. How do we start to bridge the gap with designers, with contractors, with owners? And that really kind of sparked and fueled my curiosity to figure out my path in the industry and really realizing that this thing called virtual design and construction could be something that I wanted to chase. And so it took those first 6 years to kind of see things from the operations role and realizing that there was a lot more to be done here. And so through a myriad of different ways, from different mentors to going to conferences to having conversations with people like yourself, I just felt like there was more here. And I felt like my calling in the industry was to take my affinity for technology and my passion for construction management and fuse those things together and leading me to where I am today.
It's interesting. We've had a number of conversations with industry leaders now on the podcast, and one of the common themes is this whole idea of this field first foundation that allows you to then interact in different ways in the industry later on in a more effective manner. Is that something that McCarthy has maybe integrated into its VDC function?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, we've had an interesting journey here. As I was telling you in prior discussions, we had an idea here of what we felt like BIM and VDC could be for the business, but we really recognize that in order for groups like ours, people that are really focused on the use of technology to drive different business aspects and really integrating it into our business operations, you've really got to take that field approach first, that field focus, hearing the people that are at the point of attack, hearing their challenges, their needs, the pain points, the lessons learned, and really trying to pull that to the forefront of project planning. And so I think that's where in our journey here at McCarthy, our VDC practitioners really take a very focused approach of not only hearing the field, but bringing that to the forefront so that we're getting better at effective planning. We're getting better at integrating with our owners. There's lots of different stakeholders within the walls of McCarthy between our pre-construction, design integration, VDC, field operations, and all the other support departments here, federating all that really together and then bringing that to the forefront of our project planning so that we're not just using technology for our own benefit, but it's really for that project lifecycle benefit and being very mindful of that beginning with the end in mind approach, trying to make sure that our project teams are planning up front with the idea of what the end user, that asset owner, is going to need to do once the keys are handed over. And so that's a big part of our focus, and a big part of my strategy is trying to make sure that we normalize that and get that as dialed in as possible so that we know that we can be effective, not just for our own needs, but the needs of that entire stakeholder group.
Well, and that integrated. perspective on how to put all these pieces together into a comprehensive way of not only adding value at the project level through delivery, but also post delivery into owner life cycle of the building, I think is unique and maybe kind of segues into one of the topics we wanted to get into, which is just the kind of the state of BIM in the industry. And I think at times I've mentioned to you in my current role, I interact with the whole spectrum of GCs in terms of their perspective on BIM, and it ranges from a box to check to we mainly interact with BIM for MEP coordination to maybe those on the more mature side of that spectrum, which are really looking at life cycle, looking at a holistic understanding of how digital delivery can interact and add value to the whole ecosystem. And so when you look at that spectrum, maybe competitively from the seat of McCarthy, why do you think there is still such a range of experiences that relates to BIM still?
Well, I think that in the journey and the history of people that have been focused on BIM and focused on virtual design and construction and trying to draw the corollaries there, I think a lot of it has had to do with how much disruption that these roles and these technologies have caused the industry, and just being able to level set that and directly applying that to how we deliver our work has not been easy.
Mm.
As I like to say, over the course of time, we've had people doing BIM things, and then we've had people in these BIM and VDC construction technology leadership roles trying to really modernize our approaches to how we plan, design, construct, and operate. And that kind of varies across the board depending on how companies put value and weight to that, the ROI, the business proposition, how readily it's accepted by owners, by design partners, by trade partners. So it's been a labor of love for a number of us that have been in these roles. And I would just say it takes finesse to modernize these business practices, to get things like BIM and VDC really integrated, deeply integrated into the ways that we're doing our work. And a lot of it does come down to dollars and cents because we are operating businesses, right? We have to be profitable. We have to show success metrics. At the same time, though, these are big cultural changes that people like us have to navigate, because ultimately, we've always liked to say people first, then process, then technology. You've got to get people to really understand how these things are helping them, not just being the shiny objects, not just throwing technology at jobs for the sake of throwing technology at them. It takes time. It takes refinement. It's just something that I think the industry has still kind of yet to really level set and raise that bar up to. And so while we've got all these amazing standards that are out there, these great technologies that are doing very transformational things, it takes some really refined approaches from leaders to be able to get these things to deeply resonate, impact culture, and really allow us to really take these next steps in how we're actually going to contract and use these technologies to really bring construction technology into practice, into operational practice, so that the industry can really reap all those benefits.
I like that. I mean, I think there's a lot there, but I think pointing out the fact that in the age of technology and AI and all of these advancements, leadership still matters. And the culture that leaders are able to still produce matters. And I think that's a really interesting point. When you think about all the different variables that maybe are impacting a project team's ability to successfully implement BIM, the use of a design model and all the disclaimers that come along with it to not necessarily use it. How do you overcome that? What's the perspective that McCarthy takes on how much they want to go upstream versus maybe kind of stay in your lane?
Sure. Well, as I've seen throughout my career, the way that people are going to use technology is their purview, right? It's their prerogative. And so we've got to be very respectful of the fact that firms that are using technology in very specific ways, they've done that over the course of time because they know how it's affecting their delivery of their services. And so you've got to have sensitivity there. You have to be able to meet people where they're at in their technology journey. And so to the extent that we can partner deeply and just really understand people's approaches, the why behind what they do, how they do it, and being able to bridge that gap, I think, is paramount, because ultimately we all need each other to deliver amazing design and construction services for our owners, and for our own business needs. So to enter conversations at the beginning of planning a project and towing a hard line, probably not going to get you the best results, right? You've got to be able to bridge that gap. And so to me, the best success always typically comes in the form of that early partnering conversation. How are you using technology to drive your business operations? Who are your stakeholders? What are their goals? What are their value points? And the more that you can feather that out at the beginning of a job, the more that people can understand other approaches and kind of think inside someone else's box, so to speak, will yield you those better partnering results. Because to me, when I've seen success the most, it's having those discussions up front rather than waiting for those to happen later. And also revealing the information that other partners need to see so they understand the downstream use. If I'm trying to tell an owner or a design partner, hey, I'm going to use BIM in these ways, and it's only for my own benefit, there's probably not going to be as much buy-in there or reciprocation. So you've got to be able to talk about, well, we do these things here as a contractor, and these are the results they're going to bring. And here's how you can contribute. Here's how these are going to make a positive impact for you. And if we do it better together, then I'm going to hopefully give you, return value. And if you can give us these things, then we'll be able to give the downstream people that are going to consume that return value. So a lot of that early partnering, that information exchange, so to speak, on how we do what we do, I feel like it's critical for us to really take that next step as an industry to recognize how we can better use technology across our project's life cycle.
Yeah. Are you finding that there are kind of verticals or project types where both the supply chain and the owner groups are more aligned or have a more holistic, and maybe those are two separate questions, but maybe more on the owner side. Are there verticals that you're seeing where the owners are more aligned to the role Ben is playing through like their end product?
I would say it's the owners that have become more aware of what they can have if they have truly integrated project teams working together. I see most of our campus-based owners, repeat builders that have multiple buildings and systems across a wide variety of properties. Like they're the ones that seem to be coming to the table saying, hey, instead of hiring our design partner and our construction partner separate, we want to go at this from a design build standpoint or an IPD standpoint. Owners that are caring more about data and having better digital representation of their build assets, like they're the ones that are starting to know that they can have more if they ask the right questions during the RFQ process, or if they restructure their contractual agreements to where their design and construction teams are better served together by having these cross-party agreements, shared benefit, shared risk. So I see a lot of that as like where the industry could go if more owners leverage those mechanisms in which to do that. I think that we all could definitely see that happening most readily in our healthcare markets and our mission critical markets, the aviation markets. Again, repeat builders, repeat owners that are seeing that opportunity and knowing what they can have back if they get those parties aligned early. Of course, timing is everything. You probably saw that smart market report that Dodge just put out there about data centric owners. Amazing deliverable that came out from NIBS, National Institute of Building Sciences, one of the organizations that I spend a lot of my time with. I think a lot of owners could really glean a lot of data points and results if they see more of those types of things demonstrating and representing what the industry could have if we bring it together at the forefront early of project planning.
Yeah, that makes good sense. I had the thought just now, um, while I was listening to you as well. I had the thought between the Buckeyes and McCarthy, do you have anything that isn't red, white, or black?
The wardrobe is pretty tailored to that color palette. It all just works out, right? It all does.
Yeah,
Near
well
and
done.
dear to my heart.
It's like, well, how'd you end up McCarthy? Well, the color scheme really worked well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Some things just
So
work out.
that's right. So you talked a little bit earlier about, the role that leadership plays in creating a culture for some of these technologies and processes to really prosper. Um, which I've seen as well throughout my career. When you look at digital transformation or a culture around creating kind of productized digital delivery processes, what role do you think executive buy-in plays in either tactically crafting that or strategically kind of creating the environment for that kind of intentionality to exist?
Well, for me, with our executive leadership, a lot of it comes down to the connection between strategy and making sure that we've got the right people and tools in the business to be able to go and execute these things and do them really consistently. We're trying to not create one-off solutions here. We really want it to be scalable to make an impact for the overall organization. And so when someone is hiring McCarthy or we're coming onto a project, we want to try to have the best seamless and repeatable approach as much as possible so that it's accepted in the business. So I spend a lot of my time with our leadership, just making sure that we're really dialed in on the right tool sets, the right people plugged into the right markets, into the right areas of our business so that we're driving really good synergy internally. But then when we show up to the table and we're meeting our design partner for the first time, or we're working again with an owner that we've done business with, we want that experience to be very normalized. We want people to understand that our approach is meant to be holistic. We want people to understand that our approach is meant to be complementary so that whatever they're doing and what we're doing is going to work well together. That goes back to a lot of the partnering discussions. So a lot of it for us lives in those veins, and really want to making sure that the approach that we take is not rigid but flexible. But we've got kind of our standard practices that we've developed over the course of time, and we want to use those with our lessons learned, use those with flexibility in mind, and keeping that door open for innovation as well, because we know that we're not perfect. We always want to keep crafting and refining our approach and our strategy. And I think that's critical for businesses to continue to be competitive in the current and future market, but also for us to make sure that we've got good, strong top talent here, and that we got the right folks with the right approaches working on our projects to be delivering that really awesome, really effective client experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a progressive take on kind of where we are slash need to go, and maybe a sensitive question to some extent, but has that yet turned into increased margins slash has it affected materially McCarthy? And what I'm trying to ask is when we talk about that spectrum of GCs that are either checking a box or thinking strategically about digital delivery, often they'll compete in the same jobs, and maybe their RFP will look the same to an owner that doesn't really have the same level of perspective on the role BIM can play in value delivery. How has McCarthy attempted to identify maybe not ROI, but some kind of hard metric to understand the output of the investment in that kind of strategic approach to delivery?
Yeah, it definitely is tricky, right? There's a number of things that we could measure. A term that that I've been saying for the better part of a couple of years now is, how do you measure the cost of goals not scored? And
Yeah.
when in a role like virtual design and construction, we're blocking and tackling a lot of digital risk that ultimately makes its way to the field. And so you're trying to always measure, like, what's the cost if I'm always pitching a shutout as an all-star goaltender, right? And you're taking a lot of pucks. I'm a hockey player, so I was going to go there at some point, Steven. You're trying to measure the 70, 80 saves that you have in a big game on a repeatable basis. And some of those things are difficult to measure if you keep winning. And so how do you really try to shed light on the things that don't go in the back of the net? I think a lot of it for us comes down to, measuring the things that we can block and tackle in the design phase that never make it to an RFI, or the things that we vet out during the design process that then sets us up for streamlined schedule, streamlined optimization of the use of our operations resources when we're actually going to put the work in place. You're not spending that time reworking things. You're not spending that time on complicated RFIs. The RFIs hopefully are becoming more streamlined. The answers become easier, and the time associated with answering those becomes more streamlined because you've spent so much time and craft on the digital representation that when it's time to put the physical in place, it just becomes much more smooth. So we spend a lot of that time, I would say, Stephen, looking at our design phase effort and realizing that we're pulling that risk curve forward, right? We're stopping those pucks early so that minimal as possible is going into that net later. And you're still realizing the win. Even with all those that you stopped earlier, you're experiencing those wins on the back end. So for us, it's hard to say that we're ever going to have projects that have zero RFIs. I know there's projects that are out there that say we've had zero RFIs. I would challenge and question, though, is it good that there are no RFIs?
Yeah.
Because, we like to preach that, no question is a bad question. But if you're asking very rudimentary RFIs on a process that should have vetted out a lot of those things earlier on, you're probably asking yourself then at that point, well, did we ask the right questions? Did we have a good line of sight to our risk profile using these digital tools before we got to field execution?
Yeah.
So a lot of it for us is trying to measure our effectiveness in the design phase and looking at that construction schedule, that field construction optimization, and then ultimately making sure that we put together a good digital replica of that build asset for that end user. And if we can look at all those things and do that as efficiently and as streamlined as possible, then we should be able to measure then from there, well, how much better can we be if we keep dialing in this process? And so there's a lot of meat on that one, and there's a lot of variability to it at times. But I think if you've got a good digital approach with your tools, with your processes, you've got them well documented, your teams are using them as consistently as possible, you should be able to chip away and measure those things, not just looking at the quantity of RFIs.
Yeah, I've got a couple good ones in there. Cost of goals not scored. I played soccer. One of my good buddies used to be was the goalkeeper, and he would always take credit for a win. But you have to score goals to win a game. You can at best tie if you don't. But I
Yeah,
think it's a valid analogy, and I also think like the whole idea of no RFIs being kind of a poor goal, because I think RFIs can also be a display of engagement, right? Whether or not
right.
you're really digging into the drawings in a way that is going to extract risk and expose areas and opportunities, right? And so I think that's an interesting point. Um, maybe looking at the role that tech is playing alongside process in how a team is successful. I think we've maybe had a conversation before just about the quantity of tech kind of coming into the market, and there's a lot of noise, right? And there's a lot of good companies that are doing really great things. But how do you and McCarthy look at, I kind of compared it, I mentioned this to someone the other day, which is like BIM is kind of looked at as like the cell phone of technologies. It's like it's been here since 2008. Like we've had a computer in our pocket for a number of years now,
Yep.
and it's just not that impressive. Whereas, there's all these different technologies utilizing some form of AI that could do all these incredible things. And so it's not the sexiest thing to talk about right now, but if you think about it accurately, it really can be the foundation for a lot of these other tools to do things in a much more effective manner. But when you look at McCarthy project teams, how are you guys orienting yourselves to take advantage of that tech, but also do so in a manner that kind of contributes to that consistent experience you talked about for your clients?
Yeah. Well, BIM for us is very foundational, right? A lot of us wouldn't be here if the advent of BIM wouldn't have happened. But it becomes a vehicle, a common vehicle that we can use to start playing in what I would call like this digital delivery game with the other stakeholders on our project team. So ultimately, you've got these great foundational tools or vehicles, but now you've got all these other supporting technologies that are allowing you to take that vehicle to its next destination, right? And so while building information modeling was transformational, now you've got great technology platforms and some point solutions that are really starting to draw a tighter connection between the deliverables that our teams are working on, the mediums that they're working on. And I think that's kind of the trick, Stephen, is that project teams that are working on things from their organization, from their lens, from their perspective, they're very focused on their thing. We've got to really work intently and be focused on getting the team to work on things together. And that's where people that have been doing and using BIM tools are now crossing over into the areas of planning and scheduling, and crossing over into estimating, and crossing over into digital asset management and operations. And so now that those things are starting to really cross over, cross connect, if you will, it becomes more imperative for people in roles like ours as VDC practitioners to start to connect those dots in these collaborative tools that are out there, and allowing people to live in those things day to day on our projects, so that you're not just saying, oh, well, the BIM people worry about that, or, well, that's a field operations issue, or, well, that's an engineering issue, right? It's difficult to separate those things any longer, because nowadays the environments of 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions and 4 dimensions and 5 dimensions are becoming much more integrated. And it's going to be critical that our project teams like see those, they have line of sight into those, so that they really understand how they interact with one another. The role of the VDC practitioner McCarthy is not just focused on building models and coordinating models. We're focused on gathering data from the field to make sure that the model in digital space and the field and physical space are aligned. Otherwise, we don't have a job here, right? You've got to be working very intently on the use cases and the needs of all the different stakeholders, so that we move beyond making and coordinating models. And now we're thinking about productivity tracking, and we're thinking about Q and QC, and actually how did it get built? Did the model reflect the conditions necessary to build it right? Did the field conditions change something? And now do we have a good digital as-built? It's just those things are becoming much more cross-connected. And if we're really going to do our owners right, they want that accurate digital asset to maintain their asset for as long as it is in existence. And so we've got to be very laser focused on all of those different needs and use cases, not just kind of staying in our traditional lane of, I build models, I coordinate models, I hand over models.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point. BIM kind of acts as the protocol for a whole kind of network of things to be built on top of it. And yeah, it's an interesting point. What is, when you look at some of the tech tools out there, whether it be Revitso or ACC or things in the automated layout category, is there anything that you have found to be extremely unique in terms of the way it adds value specifically to BIM workflows?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of good ones. I would just say to start, we've really entered this new era in my mind of moving beyond the model because now these digital representations are doing more to put that work in place. And I think that if we would not have seen tools like Revisto, tools like OpenSpace, tools like Dusty Robotics, just to name a few, we'd probably still be where we were 15 years ago with these siloed tools just kind of doing their thing. But now you've got more connected platforms that are evolving, right? You mentioned Autodesk Construction Cloud. Trimble has some amazing things in their portfolio. You have Hexagon and Leica doing some amazing things, tools that McCarthy is using. You're really starting to see this idea of the connected job site, and you and I have talked about this, really starting to come to fruition where you've got these digital tools connecting to physical tools, that interrelationship between sharing information on a platform versus sharing it widely and being able to access that information from the field, actually getting that digital information to flow seamlessly rather than taking out the jump drive and plugging it in, which we've all been there in our past. It's amazing, right? We really started to take that next step to connecting the office and the field, connecting stakeholders from various time zones and locations and locales to make sure that wherever the work is happening has that digital flow of information as streamlined as possible and try to make sure there's no breaks in the chain. Because ultimately, for us to be able to deliver jobs smoothly and efficiently, those breaks in the chain are always opportunity for risk. They're always opportunity for a disconnect. And that's our biggest challenge in getting the idea of the connected job site to really happen is that getting people to understand the information has to flow. And we all play a role in getting those things into the right places so people have the right line of sight and that the workflow is as simple as possible to share that information and exchange it in a timely manner. That to me is where I feel like we've always been wanting to get to. And we're getting there more and more. I feel like as technology has evolved, but it requires a lot of focus and a lot of intentionality to get the team bought in on we can do these things and share these things in these manners if we're collaborative and if we're doing these things in an aligned manner. So that everybody is optimized. We really optimize that whole of that entire stakeholder group.
No, that makes sense. What do you think what do you think like building from the model? What does that look like? Because I think this is often a goal that I think a company will craft as, hey, we want to build from the model. And that can mean a lot of different things. And so it's kind of an impossible question to answer. But maybe from Alex McCarthy's standpoint, like what does that look like for you guys?
Well, I've had a lot of superintendents in recent years that have told me that we live and die by the model, quote unquote. And I love that because to me, as a technologist in a construction organization and someone who's had a career in operations before I came into a technology role, that means that we trust it now. We trust these digital tools, we trust these digital vehicles enough to say that with confidence, these can support and inform the construction process because they're accurate, they're efficient. They allow us the information necessary to build with confidence. And a lot of our trade partners over the course of time, they've been doing this on their own, whether we've asked for it or not, but they've incorporated these digital tools into their ability to fabricate, their ability to install the work. And now all we're really doing is we're trying to bring it all more together and plan together rather than doing it, independently. So if we've got the confidence in the tools, we've got the confidence in the people putting the right information into the tools to support the work happening in the field, there's no reason why we can't do this job after job with the right tool sets, streamline that delivery as much as possible. So it's amazing to see that this labor of love over all these years, folks like in roles like myself, we've gotten to this point, but now we've got to start to envision, okay, if we've got this confidence and we can do this, getting the right people plugged in at the right times, do the right work to be as efficient as possible, is going to be the name of the game, and just getting really good and really consistent with that.
Well, and I think with that transition or that shift culturally to really almost select or trust a new source of information, the project teams structurally will begin to shift, right? And so I think thinking through kind of the future of careers in BIM VDC, and I think you've already mentioned this, which is your VDC folks and professionals are really integrated into project delivery in a number of ways. But if you were to maybe forecast what is within a GC, do you think there increasingly tends to be not necessarily a BDC specific function, but an integrated one? Or is there always going to be a role kind of like, hey, we've got an accounting department for a reason, even though everyone touches it, there's an accounting department because they're the manifest standard. How do you see the future of BIM VDC careers shifting or evolving?
Well, I definitely see it evolving into maybe even something we haven't even defined yet. There's a term that I've been using in recent years, and you're seeing more of these titles show up as well. This idea of digital delivery, this idea of really modernizing our operational approach to be thinking digitally, planning digitally, prepping the work digitally, getting it into a streamlined workflow to where that digital representation is going to be that physical. And we've got a good record of that all the way throughout that project's life cycle. I see that further embedding itself in our business and really being a part of our business operations strategy. Even without the advent of AI, I always felt like we were getting to this place where there was going to be this idea of a digital supply chain where we're truly planning things end to end with this digital approach in mind. Because technology has been growing so rapidly, but especially with AI, though, right? We're getting to this place where we've got to get smarter about our use of tech and the use of the massive amounts of structured or unstructured data in our environments, because ultimately we can learn from it. And if we can really learn from it and glean the right insights for the right jobs at the right time, we're going to get much better at deploying the right technologies and getting the right data sets to our people before the blocking and tackling even needs to happen. We'll talk about the cost of goals not scored. Well, maybe there is a future day where there really isn't any goals being scored because of the fact that we're using tools like AI and using the lessons learned from our digital assets as effectively as possible. So I see it connecting itself more and more to our business operation strategies, really getting super embedded with our ability to connect into our IT, our data systems, because ultimately, like these technologies are garnering so much data over the course of our project's history. It would be somewhat foolish to not use that to our advantage going forward to get better as we're trying to become more innovative and being more streamlined in our ability to deliver our work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could then see, I mean, chief digital officer, right? Kind of being a title that maybe continues to. Do we? I don't think we. Is there a CDO in the industry? I don't believe there is. I've never seen one.
I may have seen one or two titles out there like
Really?
that. I think it's very realistic.
The great thing about the C-suite titles is there's a new one that pops up about every couple years, and chief digital officer does have a nice ring to it, though. I will give it that.
Yeah,
So if you were to look at and maybe talking about AI briefly, I've had a chance to play with the ChatGPTs, and not just play. Like I would say, I'm at a point where ChatGPT is integrated into how I do my business, how I run a lot of things, and it is literally saving me hours a day, every day. And when organizations like McCarthy look at AI, there's a lot of risk, obviously, that's represented as well. And maybe this is its own podcast, but like how is McCarthy approaching that kind of risk opportunity equation with AI?
sure. Well, I mean, we're definitely crafting strategy around it, as I know a number of our peers are doing as well. I think it's critical as an industry. I think we have to, right? You can't ignore it. It's creating tons of shifting, it's creating tons of disruption, but I do believe it can be harnessed. I think that's kind of the key with this is how do we harness these emerging technologies, these disruptive technologies in a way that allows us to be more in tune with how they can help us rather than hurt us.
Mm.
And in some ways you got to keep it closer to your chest than you do keeping it away from you, because
Yeah.
ultimately we're all going to find ways to leverage it potentially in different ways. But ultimately we know that the technology is becoming more and more robust even as we speak, even while we're on this podcast, it's learning from us. So we've got to be aware of the fact that we can harness it. It just comes down to How do you want to harness it? To what extent do you want to harness it? And then how does it really attach itself to your organizational mechanisms? To me, I feel like as I've researched things like AI and looking at things like automations and advanced robotics and the ways that our technologies are doing better for us and the way that we're contributing and giving back to our key technology partners, we're looking at things like road mapping and our digital maturity, assessing ourselves and trying to be more mindful of our own innovative ways of expanding our business. I just think a lot of it just comes down to really being laser focused on what we need to do to be successful, recognizing what's out there and being able to harness and leverage that, and then really crafting that digital strategy in a way that allows us to be very responsive to the needs of industry and the needs of our business, but also being mindful that technology is going to keep evolving and it's going to continuously be an area to play in from an innovation standpoint. And so staying very close to it, not being afraid of it, and making sure that when we go and we want to, approach it or attack it in a certain way, we've got the right value points in mind, not just chasing the shiny objects, which has been a trend over the course of time for folks like myself who've been in these roles of trying to make heads or tails out of. Is this just a shiny object flash in the pan, or is this really something that's going to move the needle from an innovation standpoint?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. And what is your take on the data privacy side of this? And we didn't talk about talking about this.
Sure.
I'm just like throwing curveball. But I think
Yeah.
my thought is we've sat on a bunch of dead data. We create dead data on every project that
Yep.
that is really inaccessible and in all different ways. And yet this technology comes along and we start thinking that our dead data is a lot more valuable than it is. In some ways that's true. But I also wonder if we're overestimating how valuable and differentiated all our data is.
That's a fair question. I wrestle with that as well. I think there's always something to be learned, but you're trying to grab the right piece of fruit, right? And you're asking yourself, is that juice worth the squeeze to go and grab that and mine
Yeah.
what you want from it? It is tough. It's distracting in some ways, right? Because you mentioned dead data, and I always do believe that you can learn something. But ultimately, if you go down that rabbit hole and you try to chase that, and you're trying to yield some result, you gotta, I guess, be a little bit careful. Is it something that you're just trying to chase, or does your business operations believe there's something there?
Yeah.
And if you do go chase it and you present that to them, is there an opportunity to then bring that back to the business in a way that says, hey, we're going to modify some of these processes based on what we've learned? Or we've recognized that there's not a tool in our toolkit that is solving for this. So we now have to go and find something or build a bridge to something. It's a tricky one. It's
Mm.
something that we wrestle with every day, so that hits home for me.
Well, when you come up with a solution, Alex, you post it, and I'll hit the like button on it. All right.
There you go.
Um, so what we do like to do is kind of go back, look at your past self, and think about what would you kind of pass on to the next generation of some of the lessons that you've learned. What comes to mind when you think about your kind of arc in the industry, and maybe any advice you'd pass on to the next generation?
Sure. Well, I would probably start with this. I've been blessed to have a lot of really good mentors, people that I've reported to, people who I've met at conferences, people who have been leaders adjacent to circles that I've ran in or departments that I've served. And so I've been really keen on really leveraging different perspectives, different lenses, gleaning insights from as many areas of not only my business, but the industry at large to really try to allow that to guide myself to the right value points that I'm trying to serve and support. And so throughout that tail of the tape, if you will, I think that's allowed me to kind of shape my focus, shape my passion, gear my energy in the right areas. Because I've always kind of believed that I can make a bigger impact in our industry than just one organization that I'm serving. That's why I tend to get more involved with these other organizations that are really making big impacts to our industry. So I've always been very passionate about drawing those connection points, those parallels, because to me, I think it works for one another. It takes a village, I feel like, for us to um, really realize what is possible as an industry, and just surrounding yourself with like-minded people, people that are willing to challenge perspective, offer different points of view. I think is super healthy. It allows you to kind of be a very diverse practitioner of whatever role that you're serving for whatever organization that you're serving. So I've always looked upon that as something that I would tell anybody, please, get yourself into circles of like-minded people. stretch yourself and get involved outside your organization and other organizations that are trying to push and promote things that are going to advance our industry. Because I do believe we're in the best industry in the world. I really do believe that as a design and construction industry. And so it takes some intentionality to stretch yourself to go and do that, right? To go to conferences, go get out there and meet new people from different areas of our industry. I think that's something that a lot of folks in our industry could do more of, so that we could really start to really need to catapult to that next level of integration, next level of innovation, next level of transformation that our industry is desperately in need of reaching.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good message. I think for anyone who doesn't know, Alex can chair a heck of a conference. So if you're in the market for a conference, check who's chairing it, and if Alex is the chair, it'll be a quality conference. But I think your point about all of us have a responsibility to try and break down the fragmentation that exists in the industry, I think is a great point. And because I think we often talk about either the silos within a vertical, like data center build versus EPC versus whatever, or the silos that exist even within companies, and that's going to exist to the extent that we don't look to build networks in adjacent verticals or connect people. And I think that's a really good point, and I think I've seen that throughout your career, which is not just maybe in partnering with tech well, but also partnering with kind of adjacent industries, which I think is really interesting. I think that's great. Maybe specifically when you look at folks wanting to get into BIM VDC, what would your perspective be? Any specific advice to them?
Well, it's really cool to see that there's more and more academic institutions offering BIM and VDC as a focus. Like there are some great progressive universities and colleges that are out there having, VDC majors and BIM
Hmm.
majors, or construction technology majors with BIM VDC minors. Like it's really, really cool to see that. If you're a young person listening, like I would encourage you, like go get involved in those, whether they're elective courses or if you really want to steer your career in that direction and you want to enter the AECO industry, like that's not a bad move, because technology is only going to continue to evolve. Being in a role like that, even if you go to a design firm, a construction firm, if you want to go and work for an owner, right, there's tons of opportunities in those lanes, because technology is continuing to attach itself more and more to the way that we do what we do. If I had to go and do it all over again and it was 2025 back when I graduated, I would have definitely picked something like this if it was a major or a minor, because of what I'm seeing it do right now, what I've seen it do for the last 18 years of my career. But even for folks in the industry right now, embrace technology more than maybe you ever have, because while it might be day to day embedded in your personal life, whether you're using a smartphone or you've got really cool technology devices at your house, it's attaching itself more and more to what we do. And so I would say this is the ripe opportunity to start to go to some conferences if you've never been to ones that are focused on technology. Go to those types of environments where people are wanting to investigate, wanting to innovate, wanting to collaborate, because that to me is the vehicle to get us to really the next level of the industry. Is we don't need to keep building more silos between the stakeholders in our industry. We need to have more like-minded people that are accepting of technology, that are willing to work through the contractual aspects of how we better collaborate and partner together to get mutually beneficial outcomes, and leverage all the industry standards once again that are out there. We've got great standards that are out there from organizations like NIBS and all the other organizations that are serving our industry, between the AGC and DBIA and AIA. I really believe they can all start to come together better if people just understood a little bit more about how technology can and should work for our jobs, and being able to just, again, cross connect and federate those different perspectives between ownership, design and engineering, construction, and downstream handover.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, in the maybe closing week, you got about 7 days or a week or so until August 5th. If you need any help with names, we can reach out to the Construction Conversations community, Alex, and offer some
Yeah, man.
ideas.
Just poll the audience.
That's right. Bodie McBothface. I'm sure they'll give you something better than that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Alex, thank you for coming on. This is a lot of fun. Anything else before you go?
No, this has been a pleasure, Stephen. I really appreciate it. It's always a great opportunity to serve the better industry and our great community of construction and design and owner technology practitioners and stakeholders. Really appreciate this opportunity. I would just definitely say I'm looking forward to the football season, so I got to give you a go Bucks on behalf of my alma mater. I'm
There
excited
you
to
go.
see what happens this year, and looking forward to an active and busy fall on the conference circuit, and seeing you guys hopefully at some of the industry engagements before now and the end of the year.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll look forward to it. One last football comment. Are you also a Browns fan then?
No, I do not lay claim to the Cleveland Browns, even though I did spend 6 years
You
of
got to
my life
protect yourself
there.
emotionally. I get it.
Yeah,
That's
I
smart.
had to dissociate myself a long time ago. No shade to the organization, but no, growing up, man, I actually was a big San Francisco 49ers fan. Joe Montana
Yeah.
and Steve Young back in the day, they lured me in with their football prowess back in the 80s. So I'm a proud 49ers fan.
There you go. Yeah, Steve Young. I was a fan of Steve Young. You couldn't not like Steve Young. A good, accurate running quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing but fun. Well, good stuff, Alex. Thanks again, man. We'll talk soon.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it.